And Yasher Koach to Naomi, who thought of this beautiful way to wish her father a happy birthday. And thank you to our musicians for sharing your talents and making Shabbat so sweet. Last night, I co-taught with Rabbi Karapkin from the Beit in Thornhill. It was our second time co-teaching this class for the Hartman Institute. Under the leadership of the director of Hartman Canada, that is Holy Blossom's own Karen Collins, about 20 lay leaders from different congregations across the city come together for monthly study and for building bridges among themselves. This program, now in its second year, is a wonderful grassroots expression of the Hartman Institute's decades-long commitment to Jewish pluralism, and it makes the Jewish community of Toronto stronger. In the room were students from Reform, Orthodox, Conservative, and Reconstructionist synagogues. The topic Rabbi Karapkin and I chose to bring for conversation and study and debate was about Jewish particularism and Jewish universalism. The tension between these two good impulses, particularism and universalism, was built right in from the very beginning. It's baked into the Jewish tradition, and we see it first in the story of Abraham. So in Genesis chapter 12, God says, Lech lecha, go Avram, go forth from your father's home, from everything you know, and from the country in which you were born, and go out into the world. Why? V'nivrechu v'cha kol mishpachot ha'adama, so that all the families of the lands will bless themselves by you, so that you will be a blessing to all humanity. This is the covenant of universalism, that monotheism in particular, that a Jewish approach to how to walk through the world shouldn't be kept to ourselves, but should be shared. And when we share it, it is a blessing to all humanity. So we could turn to that text as evidence that we were intended to be universalists. You can anticipate there's another hand coming. Now, there is an assumption that Reform Jews put a greater emphasis on universalism than Orthodox Jews do. And maybe it's true. Think about our Out of the Cold program, for example. For nearly 30 years, we have made it a priority to welcome the hungry in through our doors, no matter their religious background. And a newer program for the 6 warmer months of the year, volunteering for the Ve'ahavta van. I hope you know about it. I hope you'll sign up. 2 evenings each month is Holy Blossom Night, for going out on 2 vans, one downtown, one to Scarborough, to bring hot meals and clean clothing to fellow Torontonians who are down on their luck. And we do not ask any questions. While we do participate in the Pesach food drive that is organized specifically to feed the Jewish poor, the tiny pantries that we have on Dewborn, which way is Dewborn? At the corner of Bathurst and Dewborn, thank you. We set them up during the pandemic. Those are intended for any passerby, whether they be our immediate neighbors in the government-subsidized housing building at that corner, or by folks who are waiting for the bus at the bus shelter that's right there. We see all these as expressions of universal care and concern. These are mitzvot for us to carry, sacred tasks, God-given obligations, which are ours to fulfill because we are Jews. Now, there's an assumption that Orthodox Jews put a greater emphasis on particularism than Reform Jews do, and maybe it's true. The tzedakah our Orthodox brothers and sisters give so generously is likely allocated entirely, if not primarily, to Jewish causes, while most Reform Jews I know tend to give both to Jewish and universal causes. And I imagine you have conversations either with yourself or with your partner to figure out, how do we make these decisions of allocation? Do you give to medical research, to the arts, to the universities and museums, for example? This is a good thing. And where does Jewish particularism come in? So let's go back to the Abraham story, this time, chapter 25. It's called the covenant between the pieces, which is a very strange ritual that Abraham fulfilled at God's command. And I would say this covenant between the pieces is a covenant of the particular. Why? Because God says, your offspring will be great, meaning your family line, your particular lineage will be blessed. And God says, and I will assign a particular land to you as your possession. All the book of Genesis is about Zerah, about offspring and progeny, and the family line, and Eretz, the land. A particular people attached to a particular land with a particular story. So at the covenant between the pieces, God says to Avram, know well that your offspring will one day be strangers in a land not theirs. They will be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. God tells Abraham the whole story, how it's all going to unfold. And then comes the promise, they shall return here in the 4th generation. So it's a particular people with a particular land and a particular story. So we do have a covenant of particularism as well. We here at Holy Blossom Temple take particularistic commitments very seriously. And I'll call attention to the efforts of our advocacy committee this week. I hope you get our bi-weekly emails, and I hope you pay extra attention to the section that is prepared very carefully and curated so well by our advocacy committee. So this week, there are 2 calls to action there. One is an initiative of Hillel, Ontario, a way that you can combat anti-Semitism on campuses. And the other, the second call, is concerning anti-Semitism in the TDSB. So I hope after Shabbat you'll find your way to participate in those initiatives. How do we protect our own? That is a particularistic kind of concern. And then, as you may have expected, there is a synthesis in Abraham's story. There is a wedding between these 2 outlooks and these 2 commitments, and that comes in Genesis 18. God says, since Abraham is to become a great and populous nation, and all the nations of the earth are to bless themselves by him, I have singled him out so that he may instruct his own children and his own progeny to keep the way of the eternal God by doing what is tzedakah umishpat, just and right. So a particular people called upon for a universal approach to bring blessings to the world. God says, because you are mine, care more than just about yourselves. Because you are mine, care more than just about your own. Work for the benefit of all. And you know the famous scene. This leads into that dramatic exchange between Abraham and God when Sodom and Gomorrah are about to be destroyed. And Abraham says, what if there are 50 innocents? Will you spare the cities then? And God says, yes, if there are 50. What if there are 45? And back and forth, God says every time yes, until he comes to 10. This is a kind of training up for Abraham. How to be the kind of Jew who concerns himself with other peoples and goes to bat for them and sticks his neck out for them and takes risks for them and even challenges God on high on their behalf. And God says, yes, I will not destroy them, even for the sake of 10 innocent ones. So we see this synthesis in our own prayers. Think about just moments ago in our prayer for healing. We started with our own, with those in the room. We named our dear ones, members of the congregation who are in need of healing. And then we expanded to include fellow Jews like the wounded soldiers and civilians of Israel. And then we expanded the circle of healing even further to include any innocents who are impacted by this conflict, by this hard, hard war. We can be expansive in our prayers. There's no reason to be limited in our prayers. So on this particular holy day of Shabbat, at this particular place of a synagogue, with this particular people of fellow Jews, we call others into our prayers. And that speaks volumes about who we are. Another example of this synthesis is the World Zionist Congress election, where we say, yes, of course, this is a particular kind of commitment to the Jewish people and to the Jewish state. And by voting number 2, Artza reform, you can also give expression to your universal concerns for non-Jewish minorities living in Israel. And you can call to protect the rights of Arab citizens of Israel, for example. So what about you? Where do you fit in this spectrum between the particular and the universal? How are you wired as a Jew? Are you inclined to prioritize the particular or the universal? And have you changed your emphasis since October 7th? Is there urgency to take care of your own now? What do we gain and what do we lose by setting one as a priority over the other? And how can we creatively blend the two more and more? I invite you to bring this conversation to your Shabbat dinner tables tonight and see what comes. Jewish particularism tells us who we are and where we come from, who we are as a people, and who our great-grandchildren will be. Jewish universalism tells us that we are part of one humanity, that every human being is created in the image of God, that we share a common fate with fellow citizens of our city and our world. Without Jewish particularism, we have no path to walk, and we risk losing our way. Without universalism, we Jews are alone in the world, and we risk losing our own humanity. Hillel taught it best and most succinctly in the first century, Im ein ani li mili, if I am not for myself, who am I? Uchsha'ani la'atzmi ma'ani, and if I am only for myself, then what am I? V'im lo achshav ematai, and if not now, when? Shabbat shalom.